Good morning and happy Father's Day observed. At least I am observing the Father's Day today. Are you, Pastor Eugene? Newest father.
Yes.
How has Father's Day been for you now that you are a father? Is it any different?
Yes.
How so, I guess?
I got a gift for Father's Day.
Oh,
Yeah. And it was for the baby.
is that how it is from now
I
on?
guess it is.
Nothing is about you
Yeah.
anymore. But today we'll be talking about the transgender movement. I guess it's the movement. We'll be talking about the transgender movement, the T in the LGBTQ plus. You will not want to miss this episode. So sit back, relax. On this Father's Day observed, you are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
I am Abraham Lincoln.
You are not, but it is Juneteenth, though. So there's also that. What happened on Juneteenth exactly? What do we celebrate?
It was the news of the Emancipation Proclamation. It was the news that the slaves have been freed,
Oh, yeah.
that finally got into Texas, and that small town in Texas.
Yeah.
So it reached I don't know, it commemorates like it reaching the end of the United States
Ah,
with the news that slaves are free.
from sea to shining sea.
Okay.
Anyway, also it is Father's Day observed, I believe. So
You said it like 4 times already.
no, this is a big
You're
deal.
obsessed with
No,
Father's
because
Day.
I feel like
I wonder
Mother's
why.
Day.
Why are you so obsessed with Father's Day
No,
this
it's
time
because
around?
Mother's Day is so celebrated, and
Mhm.
fathers just kind of get left in the dust a little bit.
Okay, I can see that point.
And I think we need better fathers, because if we had better fathers, then we wouldn't be having this episode.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Today we'll be talking about the T in LGBTQIA plus the transgender movement. And I wanted to just ask a quick question on the transgender movement. So I wanted to just go over the basic foundation of it, I guess. The what, the how, the why,
Really?
the when.
Okay. You're going to go to the nitty-gritty details of transgenderism?
No, not me. Not me. I'm just gonna hopefully ask the questions that'll get us there. But in broad strokes, so what is the transgender confusion, and could you actually distinguish it from gender dysphoria? Because gender dysphoria is real.
Yeah, it is real.
Yeah.
It's in the DSM-5, and it's one of the listed mental disorders that we go through, that a small minority of the population actually really does suffer from, that we should take seriously. It means that a person with gender dysphoria believes that they have been put in the wrong body.
Yep.
And so, yeah, their body is not really theirs, or so a boy will really think that they should have been a girl, but is trapped inside a boy's body.
And this is like an actual classification, right?
Yeah,
Psychologically.
the DSM-5 is the classification.
Right. And this is actually, I want to just go out on a limb and say that this is different from the transgender movement that we see today. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
Oh, we haven't agreed in a while.
Okay, I disagree. I take it back.
So, I mean, so how is it different? What are we seeing in the world today? We're seeing a lot of things. First of all, I guess a lot of people that are maybe on social media like TikTok and Instagram, and even in church curriculums. Sorry, school curriculums,
Mhm.
but maybe even church curriculums. We're seeing this transgender movement, and so what is it that we're seeing right now? Could you just kind of paint us a picture of that, and also how is it distinct from gender dysphoria?
Well, I think I don't know, this movement is pretty like broad. It entails a lot of thoughts and ideologies, but in a nutshell, if I could, it'd probably be something to the effect of people who don't want to stick to the sex binary that they've been
Yeah,
given in their gender expression. So we
yeah,
have separated gender and sex. This is something that Simone de Beauvoir that we talked about did when she was, talking about women, that you become woman. Even though you're born female, you become woman over time. So she
Mm.
separated sex from gender. This is what John Money did. He was that sick person that experimented
On the
on
twins.
the twins.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know if you want to go over that, but that is definitely one of the most sick things I've ever read
Mm.
and heard about when we experiment with people. And so that kind of separation has led us to where we are now, where people want to express their gender in a way that they want to or feel like, whatever they feel like,
Yeah.
the flavor of the day. I
Mm.
think a few months ago, I saw on TikTok someone describe themselves to be of a cake gender.
A cake,
Yeah, like a cake. So
like a
if you feel
celebratory pastry.
fluffy,
Uh-huh.
if
Wow.
you feel like sweet, you might want to refer to yourself as a cake, like cake self or something like that.
Ah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. So, you could say, please refer to me as cake self or something to that effect.
So the next question is this real? Is this real life? But just kind of going back to what you said about John Money, he was a scientist. I wouldn't even say he's a scientist. He is a criminal that experimented on two twin brothers. The one twin actually had his penis burned off, I believe, as he was getting circumcised, and the other brother did not follow with the operation seeing that, right? And so we had one twin brother with his penis burned off, then we had one other brother just normally functioning with the body parts of a male. I think his whole belief was that if you raised a male as a female, they would live or they would be okay as a female. And so I believe the conclusion that he wanted to get to and what he was trying to study was that whether you're born a biological male or female, if the environment treats you and grooms you and nurtures you as the other gender, you will grow up as the other gender. What the research found out was that both were severely depressed, I believe. Um, and this is because in their experiments, this doctor would have the twin brothers perform sexual acts on each other. And actually, uh, I believe they both died sad deaths. One committed suicide, and I believe the other overdosed.
But yeah, this is a sick psychiatrist or psychologist, I should say, um, who wanted to experiment on two poor souls who had an unfortunate accident, but
Hmm.
used them for his own agenda. And
Yep.
he hated Christian ideals. He
Yep.
hated the Judeo-Christian worldview,
Yep.
and he wanted to do everything to go against it.
Mm.
And so this is a pedophile who thought that he can reinvent gender. And he is someone that horrifically abused these two poor children, experimented on them in unspeakable ways. And then afterwards, people like us now are using his stuff to promote this transgender ideology, that we don't have to be associated with the sex that we have been, quote, assigned to at birth, unquote, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so transgenderism is just an outflow again from the rebellion against the norms, the sexual norms that God has given in
Hmm.
his holy word. We start sure with LGB, but it has to continue to go on to T. I know of pockets, not swaths, but pockets of people that do identify as L and G that don't like T, but they
Yep.
will never say anything against it because this is all a part of that progression. You can't say anything against it because it will eventually come back to you. So even if you don't like it, I know people that, I even listen to their podcasts and things like that who identify as L or G, but who won't say anything outright against it, or who won't go like, like I don't know, like just as they're on this tirade and this like mission, they don't have a mission against T. They just go, this is kind of dumb. and they move forward because they just want to live quietly or this libertarian life, right? But this is a progression. This is going to get worse and worse. T is not the end of it. That's why there is a plus at the end of
Yeah.
T or
Yeah.
IA or whatever it is, whether you're intersex or asexual, whatever it is. Everything is an expression that goes against the norms that God has given to us for our flourishing and his glory. That's bottom line.
Hmm.
And John Money was someone who hated Christians
Yeah.
and their ideals, and he wanted to do anything to go against them. That's why we have now people who also do the same. That's what we have, I don't know, what drag queen story hour now, and that's going
Oh
all
yeah.
across the states.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And people are like, well, it's just like, Broadway or something to that effect. Yeah, it's Broadway, I'm sure, except with sex and
Yep.
drugs for little children, you pedophiles.
Scantily clad men.
Yeah.
So, would you define then the transgender movement, transgenderism, as rebellion against God in his good and ordained gender of humankind?
Yeah, it's a nonsensical argument because there's no reasoning to it. You can't say
Right.
transgender and we're not to conform to this binary, and yet it's trans. That means you're moving from one to another. What are you moving to if there are no defining characteristics of gender?
Uh huh.
So even the word transgender makes no sense logically, and yet people are adopting this left and right. Where I think there was this one video that I saw was that people were upset with Rainn Wilson. I don't know if you follow Rainn
Dwight.
Wilson, Dwight from The Office.
Uh huh.
He said something about chest feeding, and people were just like upset that he would even like mention it in a joking way. How dare you? That kind of thing. And some people responded with their own TikTok saying, trans women are women. And again, trans woman means you are a male that thinks you are now a woman or a female, right? And so
Yep.
trans women, he would say, are women. And women are able to chest feed or whatever the word is now.
Uh huh.
Therefore, chest feeding is the proper term or something to that effect. So, like, this kind of logic is just insane. And yet, we just have to continue to adopt it because it's not, they're not here to debate you about the illegitimacy of the transgender movement. What
Yeah.
they are saying is you must conform, you must comply, you must celebrate, and now it is you must participate. And so if you don't do all these things, you are a hateful bigot, and we will do everything in our power to destroy you and the platform that you stand on. And so it is, it
Mhm.
is, it is similar to John Money, where they hate the Judeo-Christian,
Yeah.
worldview.
Yeah. So, Pastor June, how did we get here? Because I think many of us, myself included, we were just living happily. And then all of a sudden, in the past maybe 5 years, this rise of transgenderism has come about, and it's just snowballing into this huge snowball. It's like a what is that thing? Is that even the right thing?
Avalanche?
So it has snowballed into this humongous avalanche in the past 5 years, and it just keeps on speeding up and speeding up. And so people have no idea what's going on. Even 5 years ago, I feel or I think that people would not even think twice about this. This is ridiculous.
This is John Money's experiment now in the mainstream. This John Money was just one pervert pedophile who experimented on two kids. Now what we're doing is we're experimenting on everybody.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
supposed to transgender everybody. And if you're like a 5-year-old who thinks that they're of the opposite gender, then we ought to give you cross-sex hormones. Cross-sex hormones just basically means castration if you're a boy, right?
Puberty blockers.
I'm reading accounts of people who detransition. Those guys are shadow banned on Twitter, but I try to save it as much as I can. But people are not happy.
Yep.
All these fake statistics are coming up, like people are happier after the surgery, and yet There is no long-term study that proves this to be the case. You could obviously you're going to be happier right after surgery if you think you want it. What
Right,
happens
right,
10
right,
years later? What
right.
about all those statistics where people are still depressed, still suicidal if
Mhm.
were suicidal before? Nothing has gotten better for them. And so we do have statistics and studies that say that, and yet those studies aren't being espoused. It's these like immediate ones where people are surveyed right after, let's say they
Yeah,
have a surgery or right
right.
after they start taking hormones, and they feel happy at the time.
Mhm.
And so we use those studies to promote this crazy experiment, especially on our children.
So, how did we get here, though? I mean, you mentioned mainstream media. Is that what it is? Is that why all of a sudden this is just everywhere? How did we even get to this point?
I think there's a great philosopher and theologian by the name of Carl Truman that we mentioned quite a few
I love
times.
that man.
And so he wrote a book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self.
Yep.
And then he also wrote a more abridged book that we are doing a book study on,
Book
which is
plug.
called
Strange New World.
A Strange New World. Great.
Not to be confused with the Brave New World. Different
No.
book. Yeah.
Yeah. So we mentioned these two books before. He does go through a history starting with Jean Jacques Rousseau and things like that of the, in expressive individualism is mentioned and how, the self is on, the rise and
Yeah.
it's to be, you know, um, it's sacred. The self is what's sacred,
Hmm.
right? That's what
Hmm.
that's what it is. And so I think he has a good kind of path that he leads you on to show you why it's happening.
Yeah.
But we have been warned. We've been warned 60 years ago or some odd 60 years ago that when we continue on this path where we don't know how to differentiate between men and women, the roles that men and women have, that we are on this slippery slope. And these are the people who said slippery slope is a terrible, terrible argument. You can't say slippery slope and expect us to like use it as a valid argument. And yet it's a slippery slope. Again,
Yeah.
like you said, it is an avalanche now, but the slippery slope is real. We first started with, why do women have to do this?
Hmm. Hmm.
Why is it only for men?
Yep.
And we even talked about the incoherence of that argument. It's not like women are really striving to be bricklayers or coal mine workers, but it's about power. Apparently, power is something to be coveted and envied. Power is supposed to be something that we all, should deserve or some garbage like that. And we don't understand that power and authority is given by the one that, doles it out as he pleases. It's given by God. And so we are now in this place where, we started with, let's say, why should a woman stay home? This is, even asking that is ridiculous. And we've come to this place that why is a woman or what is a woman?
Yeah.
I think, so people can't even answer that question.
People
And
really can't.
Ketanji Brown Jackson said, well, that's not something that she's able to answer at the time. Even to ask that question now is a right wing talking point. If you ask this question, what is a woman? Then you are dubbed and labeled as a right wing bigot
Yep. You're a
because
mean person.
you can't ask a question like that, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So,
you can't even ask what is truth anymore.
no,
It's pretty ridiculous. So like you mentioned, I think that those two resources are very, very helpful. We'll have them listed on our description page. So we went through the how. Um, Interesting question that I want to ask is why? Why are we in this place? Why are people wanting to do this? And of course, the I guess the sin would be the answer would be sin. But could you kind of maybe go a little more specific into what type of sin is leading our society into this type of delusion?
I think that kind of that rebellious heart goes all the way back to the beginning order of things. And that's why it goes all the way back to Genesis 1. It goes all the way back to, I believe it's 126.
Genesis 1:26 reads, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." This is verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them.
Yeah. So it goes all the way back to how God has ordered things and showed us how he wants us to live and see reality. We want to fight against that. And so it's going to keep on going back all the way until we have this decreation. Now, I think the popular term is deconstruction.
Yep.
People think deconstructionism is something like smart or this intellectual thing to do. It is intellectually dishonest, and there is a bias and a motive behind all deconstructionism that they are hiding, that they're not showing. So it's like you're going into an experiment already with a bias. That's what deconstructionism is. And that bias is going to taint your view on everything that you do and see and how you read the results. And that's what it is, because God is truth. And if you rebel against God, do you have the truth? You absolutely do not have the truth. And if God is truth, then we should be learning from what God has shown us. You know why we are in the place we are, why we have the success and the prosperity that we have, why we have the riches in our technological advances, the inventions that we have. Why is the US the leader in the world of all these things for the last, I don't know, however many decades and even centuries? Isn't it because that we as a nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles? It was founded on principles that are laid out by the Word of God. Every single founder of the United States agreed to this. They knew of this, and the only real, like George Washington was not a liberal. Thomas Jefferson was, but Thomas Jefferson wasn't the leader of the United States until number three. But George Washington was, and he lived down that principle that undergirded and gave the foundation of the country that we have now. It's unfortunate because now we want to twist that history and remake and reshift what reality was to what we want it to be. So the United States is, this evil capitalistic, they're all pigs or something like that. Not understanding that what we have here has never been done before because of the grace of God and because this is something that God has given us grace to enable, to enact, to put in place. And instead of seeing it as a blessing, of course, there are, sins that are committed. We're not perfect, but we have learned from them and we have advanced because we have repented from them. We want to upturn everything now. We want to make what is up down and what is down up. And that's how we're seeing all this chaos.
In essence, what you're saying is the why of this movement is rebellion against God and his created order, which he said was good.
Yeah, rebellion is hatred against God. We hate what God has for us. We hate the order that He has, given us. We don't think it's good. We think that we could have sex with whomever, with whatever, whenever we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
When sex was one of the most precious gifts that God has given humanity to make humanity flourish, to be fruitful, multiply, have dominion over this earth. And so we hate that and we want to do whatever we can. We think that we can flourish without God. That's basically what it is. It's all these now like philosophers like Nietzsche and like the psychologist Freud, all these guys come together
Yeah.
to make this nonsensical movement that we have now. And the way we do it, or the way they're doing it, is that if you don't follow this nonsensical thing, or if you continue to try to reason or to make logic out of it, you're racists, you're white supremacists, you're a bigot, you're transphobe, whatever it is. There's just name calling.
Yeah.
And so when we do that, people are afraid. They're afraid because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose money. They don't want to lose their reputation or status. So they won't fight against it. And it's been a very effective movement. So I don't think it came out of nowhere. I think it came out from a rebellious heart against God, and
Right.
that planted seeds. And it started with, our expressions that we ought to have. So the roles that we ought to play as a male and female. And sometimes I wonder if we should have even said gender roles. Aren't we giving into John Money's ideology when we say
Right.
gender roles?
Right.
it's just sex roles that we've been given, right? If
Mhm.
you're a man, then you've been given this responsibility. If you're female, then or male, then you're given this responsibility. And if you're
Right.
female, you've been given these responsibilities. These two are there for the flourishing of mankind and for the glory of God. And if you don't like it, that's when you'll start raging. I don't like this. Why can't I do that? It's like a petulant child who says, when you say, "Well, you should walk on the sidewalk. It's good for you." I'm like, "Well, why can't I walk in the middle of the street? Why do you always have to you limit me to the sidewalk?" And you can
Don't
say, "Well,
limit
if
me.
you walk into the highway, you'll be a pancake."
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned a couple different things there that I wanted to point out is that God is truth. And I think this problem right now is a significant one because this really goes beyond gender. And before you said that the plus is there because we don't know where this movement is going. It's continuing to evolve into this humongous avalanche, this storm. And it really is, they're defining what truth is by themselves.
I mean, they won't use the word truth, but I think we know where they're going. They don't know where they're going.
Uh
They
huh.
think this is like a brand new frontier,
Yeah.
um, a brave new world, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a brand new frontier, but we know where this plus is going. This plus is going to continue to rebel further and further, go away from God more and more until we end up like Sodom and Gomorrah. There's only a certain amount of patience that God will have to someone continually spitting in his face, defying him, and saying that I hate you, God, and trying to continue to crash into him,
Yeah.
thinking that he can defeat God. What kind of arrogance is that?
Right. So I think this problem is a significant one. It's beyond the context of gender. And so, I think a lot of our listeners may have Christian application questions, and that's what I wanted to go into. Um, so, this whole movement is about their happiness. Leah Thomas, the male swimmer that has been competing in the female swim competitions for the NCAA, when asked in response to critics who say that he transitioned in order to win more swimming medals, this is what he said. Trans people don't transition for athletics. We transition to be happy and authentic in our true selves. Transitioning to get an advantage is not something that even factors into our decisions. Perhaps it doesn't factor into the decision, but that's the reality of it. He's been winning everything, and right now he's fulfilling his quote unquote dream to be in the Olympics. Because I think there are like Olympic trials coming up, and he was eligible to get into them because he's a male swimming in a female swimming competition. So my question, the reason why I even bring that up is Leah Thomas brought up happiness. What about their happiness? Don't we want people to be happy? Isn't the pursuit of happiness an inalienable right? What about their happiness and are as Christians is that enough for us to say you're right? You deserve to be happy. You should be happy. Go chase your happiness. How would you respond to this? I want to be happy, Puge.
Yeah, Leah Thomas' story is out there. I think it's on the front pages because he's so successful, and
Very.
people are upset about that, and I think people because it's sensational, it makes news, and people want to report on that. People will click on that and read stories like that. Um, yeah, Leah Thomas has a problem. If he truly has gender dysphoria, then he needs help. He needs mental help. He doesn't need affirmation by the media, by the crowds of his dysphoria. If he truly is dysphoric. Other than that, if we take his words at face value, then he really is arrogant. It's about the self. It's
Yep.
not about anybody else. It's
Yep.
about you being happy. You being happy at the expense, obviously, of other people. You as a man taking that number one or two or three spot is taking it away from a female in female sports.
Yep.
You as a man walking around in the girls' locker room naked is taking away from their innocence. It's taking away from what was sacred, a safe place. And now, you are not just disrupting that, you are desecrating that safe place by walking around naked as a man in a woman's locker room. You, as a man, doing all these things is rebelling against God and hatred toward your neighbor. That's what it is. And that's what he needs to understand. Him, is he truly happy? I don't know. I can't judge. I don't know his heart, but God knows the heart. If you think you're happy and you believe that this is the only way you could be happy and it goes against God's law, then your happiness is short-lived. If that even is the case. We know this to be true. I believe Sodom and Gomorrah was a very angry place, the way they would beat down the door of Lot and
Uh-huh.
things like that.
Uh-huh.
But I believe they were also in search for personal and self fulfillment. I believe they thought that they deserved to have sex with those angels, to rape them, to assault them in any way they pleased. They deserved it because it was about them. This expressive individualism isn't new, but it's been there since we saw sin. When Eve looked at the fruit and she desired to have wisdom and it was pleasing to the eye, she took of it and she ate it and they gave it to her husband who was with her. It's all about me. What do I think is good? And so when stuff like that happens, you know, even if we took his words at face value, that is an incredibly arrogant statement at the expense of not just him and those people around him, but every single woman in that sport now, because it's at the collegiate level, is going to be affected by this dude impersonating a woman. This is like Silence of the Lambs to an even more disturbing degree. You can't wear the skin of another sex and think that you really are that sex. It doesn't matter how many cross sex hormones you take, it doesn't matter how many surgeries you get, you will never be the opposite sex. You know, this is a point that that conservative analyst uh, says, Matt Walsh. He says that, you know, even if you dug up the bones of someone 300 years, you know, later, you would know if they were female or male because it's in our DNA. Sex is in our DNA.
Yep.
And so now people just want to rebel against even the very fiber of our being because ultimately, like we said, this is a rebellion against God.
What about happiness though? Don't you want me to be happy?
No, that's the thing. Happiness, it can be short-lived. Happiness is something that we can do at the expense of others. You know what? If I was truly evil in my heart and I thought that by slapping you in the face and taking your laptop away from you would make me happy, I would be convinced that that would make me happy. But is that the happiness that we should seek at the expense of others?
Mm.
At the, you know, rebelling against God, those things will not last. In
Ah.
fact, those things are things that will continue to heap on punishment and wrath against you. You think you can have happiness now. Well, this is the most happiness you will ever have. And I believe that's why Satan and his, you know, demons are doing what they can because after this, they're not going to be able to do anything. They'll be shut out for all eternity. And so they're going to get what they think they can get right now, not knowing this is, you know, continually heaping up more wrath and judgment on themselves. And that's what humans also follow. Humans are following in their father's footsteps, their father being Satan. And so they're doing exactly what their father is doing.
You may disagree with this, but I'm convinced that I don't think they're happy. I just don't think they're happy. I think the way that we are made in the image of God with the sensus divinitatis, as Calvin would say, and perhaps this doesn't relate, but I don't think they're happy. I don't think people in sin are happy. I think they have the illusion of being happy, but they're just not.
Well, the Freudian idea of that sensual pleasure equaling happiness has twisted the idea of what happy is. So when we receive
Ah,
sensual pleasure, then we believe that we are happy. So if you are, let's say, gay or lesbian, and you believe that you could only really get that fulfilling sensual pleasure from, you know, same sex, you know, acts, then You believe that that's what makes you happy. That's how
Uh-huh.
people define happiness.
Right, right, right.
But that's not what happiness is. I
Mhm.
would agree with you on that point. However, their definition of happiness is that exactly what Freud is. Freud
Mm.
was saying it's sensual pleasure, and so in a sense, like he had twisted it all the way down to the baby, where
Yeah.
he would think that babies are sexual beings. This guy was a twisted freak, and yet we still use him for for our psychological purposes and things like that. But all these people that continue to go against the order of God, again, we're saying again
Mhm.
and again, you'll become more and more of a freak. You won't be happy, but you'll be twisted in your understanding of what happiness is. And yeah, you'll be angrier, more bitter. You'll be covetous and envious of those that have truly achieved happiness when you believe that this is something that you deserve. That's why there's ridicule against Christians, ridicule. There's persecution, even outside the United States. And again, people think ridicule and persecution are completely separate, but they're not. Mockery and persecution, Jesus puts in the same sentence. They will mock you. And then that derision we saw even in First Samuel, when Goliath was defying the ranks of Israel, he would use that kind of mockery to taunt, but also to deride, to demean, to instill fear, to shame the Israelites, right?
So, I really liked your response. You one-upped me there because you said, "Yeah, I agree with you, but also this." So that was nice. So for people that believe they're happy, they're really not, or like you said, their definition of happiness is incorrect.
But that's what people will use against you.
Right.
So they'll say, Sam, who are you to deny this person their happiness?
Yeah.
That's what they'll say.
Yeah.
If two gay people want to get married and by getting married, they'll truly be happy, who are
Mhm.
you to deny it? And that's what even that's where the Obergefell decision was
Right.
such a horrible decision in 2015. Um, with even quote unquote conservative Justice Gorsuch signing with that, um, in the most recent case, right?
Yeah.
With yeah. Anyway,
I mean, but then I guess as a Christian, we would respond by saying that true happiness is living in the order of God, right?
yeah. I mean, if you really want to be fulfilled, and that's what you mean by happy, if you want to be blessed,
Yeah.
like the Bible talks about, and then the Bible gives us a formula of who are the blessed,
Mhm.
who are the truly happy.
Mm.
You know, they're the ones that are poor in heart.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are meek. They're the
Yeah.
ones that are pure in heart. They're the ones that are peacemakers. They're the ones that Jesus talks about in the Beatitudes. They're the ones that are like a tree planted by a stream of water in Psalm 1. They're the ones that know what God has planned and follow and ask for God's will to be done. Those are the ones that are truly content, who
Mm.
know what their purpose is and are able to fulfill it.
I want to just ask another one. I think we may be kind of repeating things here, but the reason why I keep on trying to go back to this is because I think this is what our listeners hear. This is the reasoning for the transgender movement. What about them being authentic to who they are? How can we deny them being authentic to who they really are? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really common expression. If you deny someone their authenticity, what you're doing is you're promulgating even more hatred,
It's
and
violence.
you're doing violence against them. But you're encouraging their depression or their suicidal tendency or something like that. If we don't accept them for who they are because
Yeah.
they believe that they are authentic. Well, that's not what the Bible teaches us. The Bible teaches us in Jeremiah that the heart is deceitful above all else. We are not to trust our hearts. Our hearts will deceive us.
Hmm.
It'll tell us that we want this when that is actually the worst thing. Cain's heart told him he needs to kill Abel to be happy.
Yeah.
And yet, what happened? He was cursed. He was not happy after he killed Abel, and he lost a brother. And so we saw mankind completely go downhill after Cain's murder as well, all the way down to, I believe it was Lamech who boasted
Oh, yeah.
Cain's descendant Lamech, who boasted that
Mhm.
if Cain is avenged like or cursed like
S
seven
s
times, then he's 77. That's a
Yeah,
boast.
yeah,
That's not like a plea for mercy like Cain had asked. He's boasting like, look at me. Like if you touch me, you're gonna get even something worse than Cain.
right.
And so this kind of action of trying to be authentic turns into this evil boast. And again, it always goes back to rebellion. Are we following God or are we rebelling against God?
Mm. So, how do we discern then how to approach someone that may be going through something like this? Um, I think one of the biggest concerns that people may have is, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to be canceled. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose this friendship. So, what is some wisdom that you can give us on how we can prayerfully approach someone that is going through something like this?
There's a film that I mentioned. There's a film by this conservative analyst that I mentioned, Matt Walsh, excuse me, called "What Is a Woman?"
Yep. Great
And
film.
I think he does a brilliant job of asking the question and just asking questions. I think we can offer some criticism on it, but I think from the beginning, I just want to say how brilliantly this film was produced and, how it was written,
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
All he did was ask the question, what is
Yep.
a woman? And he would use this question so that people would try to answer it and they would stumble on their own words. That's it. So, what's the proverbs that we're talking about? Not to address a fool according to his folly, lest you become like him, and but to address a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. What's that Proverbs?
Proverbs 26, verse 4 to 5 reads, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes."
I think that's really important for us to know. People are like, well, what does that mean? Would you answer him or not answer him? Yeah, you don't answer a fool according to his folly. Like you don't give in and placate to the definitions they have if they're nonsensical. And I remember seeing this like TGC video of someone saying we should minister to trans people by affirming the gender that they believe that they are. That's insanity. I can't believe this is a Christian organization doing this. And Dr. Waters answered brilliantly as well. We don't affirm someone's insanity. We don't affirm someone's lies or deceit. What you do is you tell them the truth. You love them by telling them the truth. So you don't answer them according to their folly, meaning you don't give in to what they believe to be truth when it is actually a lie. And you answer them unless they be wise in their own eyes. So you give them the truth so that they won't think that their way is right. So your job is not to stay silent on this issue. It's not to find yourself a little hole and hope that things will pass by. Your job is to speak truth. And that's what it means to really love someone, is to speak truth to them. When you don't speak truth, you do not love them. And so when we deal with people, we speak to them with the ultimate reality that God has given us in Jesus Christ, through Jesus Christ, by Jesus Christ, by giving them that truth.
Is this worth losing our jobs over?
People are afraid, and I think it's a legitimate concern. Like if you don't go through this, not only maybe you won't lose your job, but you'll be like shadow banned, like on Twitter. You'll be blackballed in the workplace. That you'll have a little flag on you that you won't see, but all your bosses will see, so that you'll never rise up in the ranks. I mean, any of those things can happen.
Mm,
I mean, that's exactly what the people in Corinth were afraid of too. They didn't want to lose their, their guild status or whatever it was. And so they would give in a little bit to to the people that are around them, to their paganism. They would give in with their love feasts. And we read that in First Corinthians, right? Paul spoke out clearly against that. You don't do that. You don't mix paganism with Christianity. Those two do not mix. Just like poison and water don't mix. You can't drink it. The
yeah.
whole thing becomes poisonous.
Mhm.
And so we don't mix those two things. When you don't mix those two things and you separate it, there will be consequences in this world. However, we see time and time again God showing his people that they are to be separated, that they are to be holy, that they cannot mingle with the darkness of the world, but they are rather to be light. So you're supposed to shine bright. You can't put it under like a bushel, you can't put it under a lampshade. You have to let it shine bright. And so there will be consequences. But God is the one, I'm not telling you to do that. God is the one telling people to speak his truth, to speak the gospel truth to a dying and dark world.
So we have to speak out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, Only then will we see like that offer given to people and they will either repent or their hearts will be hardened and it
Mm.
will get worse. But if you don't do that, there's nothing that's going to happen. In fact, it's just going to get worse and worse, and you'll be a coward for it.
So I guess my question is, is this something that we go out of our way to speak out against it? So, for example, let's just say we work in a company and there's somebody that works on our floor that is transgender. Is this something that we have to go up to them to speak out about it out of our way? Or like when you say that we have to speak out, what do you mean by that?
So I think this is anecdotal now. Um, the way we live our lives, if it's Christ-like, is going to be plenty loud. I don't know. There was this joke once between like s- this politician, businessman, and Billy Graham or something like that. They went golfing together.
Oh,
I forgot all the details, but they went golfing together, and then they had this fourth guy come, and this fourth guy was raging and raging because he just hated the whole course. I don't know what it was. So they asked him like, what happened? Why are you so angry?" He's like, he was, and then the guy who was raging was tired of Billy Graham just, insisting on his like worldview that God is, God and things like that. He hated that.
yeah.
And they're like, oh man, was Billy that like, you know, that vocal about his faith? And the guy answered, no, he didn't say a word.
Hmm.
But I mean, it just goes to show that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that was like all the details of that joke, but what I've realized, and this is again anecdotal, is there are times you need to speak. There are times that you need to live. There are times that you need to be wise enough to discern what to do. And I believe that the Holy Spirit will empower His saints when those times come. And I don't think it's something where I want to give a formula to someone who says if there is a transgender person, you must immediately go
Right.
and attack them.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
don't think that's the formula we want to give. But I do believe that each scenario has a discernment that, like a discernment value we must have to be able to respond in a Christ like manner. But it does not mean we stay silent. That's the point. It doesn't mean that you can stay quiet and you can ignore and then you could go into your own private, like safe space and think this is all going to pass. That's
Mm.
not what a light does. Light imposes its lightness to those that are around them. And how that's done, I believe, takes discernment and wisdom.
Last question for this morning, and it pertains to our children. Our children are being affected by this ideology, whether it's through social media or movies or even video games. There's one video game that I play with some of our youth group members, and it's a very simple game. You're like a little animal, and you run around and attack each other. It's harmless fun. But something that actually Brian brought up, because he actually plays it. Something that Brian brought up was even in that game, there are ads for LGBTQ characters, which was mind-boggling to me. This is obviously a very simple game for kids, and even there are ads for LGBTQ, and so our kids are being affected in many different ways. How do we approach this with our children? If our children ever have gender dysphoria, how do we approach it? And with our kids, how do we just approach this topic in general?
Yeah, that's a question I can't really answer quickly. Let me try to attempt it though. I believe that children are malleable and that the world knows this. And so children are going to be the ones that children are next in this experimentation of this transgender ideology and rebellion, this sexual rebellion against what God has for us. In the 60s, they called it a sexual revolution. It really was a rebellion against God. And this is what it's led to. This is the fruits and the outgrowth of that kind of rebellion. Children are next in line because we want to corrupt everything that is innocent, everything that is sacred. Those that are pure of heart, we want to, really inject that blackness and darkness, and so that they can't have, like, even a potential to have a good, decent, quiet life. And so, what are we to do about it? We First of all, you should be informed as a parent. You should know what your what your kids are doing. And I think I've said this before, but if you're a parent and your kid is on TikTok, you have to know what your kid is watching on TikTok. There is no excuse for you as a parent now, knowing what we know. And there's that account that we mentioned, Libs of TikTok, which is great, who just gathers information about what these libs are doing on TikTok and just puts it out there for us to see. You have to be able to monitor that. And yeah, you have to guide your children in the right way, in the way of righteousness.
Mm,
Like it says in Proverbs, you need to guide your child in the right way so that they won't turn from it to the left and right when they get older. And so this is what we ought to do as parents. This is our, commission as parents. We must do that. Kids nowadays, and this is from me talking to many parents of teenagers even, they're convinced that being cisgender is a bad thing. So even if they are, heterosexual, they're straight, they believe that they are the sex that quote unquote they've been given or assigned to, they don't want to associate themselves with that kind of, label, because
mm,
these are the people that are the oppressors. Now we've mixing in like this Marxist ideology with this transgenderism. And so everything's getting mixed together. Any kind of evil, we're all getting mixed together. I mean, anybody who's read Das Kapital from Karl Marx knows that what he said was illogical. It doesn't make any sense, but we just take the things that we want to take and say Marxism, that's the way, things like that. But we're mixing whatever we can because we want to corrupt the innocent. We want to destroy any semblance of hope that a future generation might have because we're evil, we're corrupt, we believe we deserve it.
mm,
I really don't see us so far from Sodom and Gomorrah and what they did, where they demanded to have sex with those angels, and to demand it to take away their innocence, their purity, because I don't know, they maybe hated it, they were angry, maybe they thought they deserved it, they couldn't stand that anyone else could be pure or beautiful and right before God. And so God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And now Sodom and Gomorrah is associated with LGBTQ,
yep,
right?
yep, yep.
And so those are things that we ought to keep mindful of, especially when it comes to our children. We must not give a quarter to this kind of corrupt movement,
Mm.
and we must stand firm in our resolve to teaching our kids what is right, what is true, what is noble, all these things that we ought to meditate on.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we will be, actually, speaking of confusion, we will be speaking on some social media posts that we've been seeing of popular evangelical leaders. I think it would uh, be interesting for us to just kind of comb through them because these are public statements that these leaders are making. And yeah, tune in next week to find out. It's going to be a good one, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Hopefully, Brian thinks so. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.
Peace.